On today's Locked On Jayhawks, why KU starting center Bryce Foster has to have a big game for KU to take down UNLV, and Rebels players to watch for the matchup.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio, and you can find our show. It's called Locked On Jayhawks anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. Thank you to the everydayers tuning in to each and every episode. Thank you to making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We're going to be getting into why Bryce Foster needs a big game for KU to take down UNLV on Friday night. We're going to get into some players to watch for UNLV in the matchup, and we're going to get into, through the first two games, three areas where KU is excelling, three areas where KU is struggling in the early portion of the season. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So we're going to start with Bryce Foster, why I think he needs to have a big game. I guess full disclosure, last week we talked about why the linebackers needed to have a big game for KU to win. Linebackers did have a good game. Linebackers helped KU stop the run, and I think the defense did everything from their part to win the game. This is not necessarily a guarantee that if this plays well, because something else could not play well that you're not expecting, which in that case was Jalen Daniels. You weren't expecting Jalen Daniels to have a poor performance, to have 3 interceptions, right? If Jalen Daniels has a normal game from the larger sample size of games we've seen, Kansas wins that game. So I still feel good about where we were at last week. Okay, this week, Bryce Foster is the player I'm kind of highlighting for this. UNLV runs a very interesting defense, I guess you would say. You see a lot of these, like, especially nowadays in college football with how open everything is, you see a lot of teams running like a 4-2-5, 4 down linemen, 2 linebackers, 5 DBs, where the 5th DB could be an extra corner, could be an extra safety. You see 3-3-5 stacks. Like in the Iowa State defense, it's kind of like a 3-3-5 where they have 2 corners, 3 linebackers, 3 down linemen, and then they have 3 safeties that kind of mix and match the looks, and it makes it tough to read defenses before the play. If you look at Pro Football Focus, the lineup that it has UNLV running most often right now is like a 2-4-5, which you like never see in college football. But basically what it ends up being is it ends up being kind of a hybrid between a 3-3-5 and a 4-2-5 or a 4-3. And like they can kind of mix and match to what they want in a specific lineup. It's basically 2 defensive linemen who are kind of like defensive end, defensive lineman types, 2 outside linebackers who are kind of outside linebacker defensive end hybrid. So like technically it could be a 4-2-5 or it could be a 2-4-5, depending on the way you look at it. And then 2 inside linebackers, 5th DB on the field, who's kind of like a slot corner. So again, it's not always this way, but that seems to be what their main lineup is, according at least to Pro Football Focus. So what does that mean? It means a lot of confusing looks. It means a lot of confusing fronts. It means a lot of fronts where 2 guys are have their hand in the dirt, or 3 guys have their hand in the dirt, or you don't know who's blitzing. Is one of the outside linebackers going to drop back into coverage, or are they going to come and rush? And so that can be difficult for a quarterback to diagnose, but it can also be difficult for the center to diagnose who's calling out, some of these protections that need to be blocked, whether it's in the running game or in the passing lane. And so it means a lot of questions. It means a lot of puzzles that kind of have to be solved by the mental side of it from KU's offense. Who needs to be blocked? Who needs to go where? Who needs to be double teamed? Who's doing what? And so far, it's helped UNLV have a great defensive start. It didn't necessarily have them have a great defense last year. They struggled on the defensive end of the floor or on the field, but so far this year, albeit against an FCS team and a not good Houston offense, so take it with a grain of salt, they have looked good. 7 sacks, 14 TFLs through 2 games. That's helped them create confusion. They've shut down the run a little bit. I mean, this has just been a good defense through 2 weeks of the season. Again, we'll see what they're worth against what should be a better offense in Kansas, though last week against Illinois, I guess there's questions about the KU offense. But typically it's the center who is the brain of the offensive line operation. It is the center who is the one pointing out the protections. It is the center who is kind of communicating what is going on in the front of the defense. And that means a lot would be on the plate of KU center, which is Bryce Foster, especially from the mental side of the game. And then you add on to the fact that he hasn't been with Kansas a super long period of time. You have a new offensive coordinator where you're running this new offense. He can be kind of a safety blanket for Jalen Daniels, I think, at the front. Good news is that in the early going, Bryce Foster is having a strong start to the season. So on Pro Football Focus, Bryce Foster has a 75.9 PFF grade. Again, I talk about this all the time. Like in the 60s is kind of your just like average starter, which it's good to have average starters, right? If you have a bunch of average starters and then you have some star players, like boom, you're a good team, right? So if he's in the 70s, that means he's been a good player to start this year. He has 78 pass block grade on PFF, 71 run block grade. And his overall Pro Football Focus grade through 2 weeks, and I guess for some teams, 3 weeks if you played in week 0, but he is right now ranked 11th among all centers in the country on Pro Football Focus. And if you just look at Power 4 centers, he's ranked 3rd in the country among Power 4 centers by overall Pro Football Focus grade. So it's been a good start for him, right? And you could say, well, one of those against an FCS opponent, which that's going to help the score. But point blank, he's been as and above advertised through 2 weeks of the season. Now, the two UNLV defensive linemen have a 62 and a 70 PFF grade overall. The high number belongs to Alex Whitmore, who has an 85 grade in run defense. He's been really good there. But beyond the physical of trying to block those guys and whoever he ends up having to block, as I just mentioned, like this game is going to test you mentally. And so that is where it really comes into play. I also look back to the Illinois game, and I say that everybody is coming out of this game, myself included, going, run the ball more, right? And so you hope KU becomes more committed to running the football and playing behind their star players in Devin Neal and Daniel Highshaw there. So if that's what you're going to do, if you end up running the football more, then that puts more onus on the offensive line to create those holes for the running backs to enter the offensive line, including Bryce Foster, to kind of pave the way and dominate in that way. The one problem with this, I will say, just to speak a little on the opposite, UNLV has been good against the run this year. They only gave up 38 yards, 1.5 yard per carry to Houston. Now, a lot of that was sacks. If you take out the sacks, it's 20 carries for 98 yards, which is closer to 5 yards per carry. FCS game, Utah Tech only had 67 rush yards on 2.8 per carry. If you take out the sack they have there, it'd be 23 carries for 75 yards. So still under 3 yards per pop. But they also shut down the running game, or I guess slowed it down, maybe would be the way of putting it. In the bowl game, KU had 142 rushing yards, but it took 39 carries. That's 3.6 yards per carry. Devin Neal had just 3.6 yards per carry. So KU's going to have to figure out this defense and how to run on it more than they did last year. And if you remember, kind of a similar style of just this like defense that you're trying to figure out what they're doing, Iowa State, KU struggled to run on them the last couple of seasons. So KU's going to have to figure that out, especially knowing that last week, like the passing issues that he had against Illinois, it's hard for me to see KU doing in the air what they did in the bowl game against UNLV in the air again this go around. And so you have to run the football a little bit more. But the good news, guess who wasn't in the bowl game for KU when they played UNLV? Sure, Logan Brown would be one answer, and he's had a good start to the season too, but Bryce Foster is the other answer, another reason why kind of an X factor in this game. So I'll say that last week we again kind of hit on this, but kind of didn't. But I could also say the quarterback is the player that has to play well every week for KU to win, and that is the case. So like it almost isn't obvious. So I think for KU to win this game, Jalen Daniels does have to play well. But like besides Jalen Daniels, because of the quarterback always being so important, I look at Bryce Foster as being just as important as anybody else who is out there. And I think if he does play well and does help open up running lanes and they are able to run the football better than they were in the bowl game against UNLV or better than any of the couple early opponents that they've played this season has been able to run on them, then it's going to open things up more for the passing game. If you can get like, it feels like KU has been just running in general, as opposed to setting up the passing game with the run, which I think is when they're kind of at their best. All right, let's continue on. Other players of note for UNLV and what it could tell us about the matchup for KU. Today's Locked On Jayhawks brought to you by Factor Meals. Fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor Fresh's never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week. You'll always have new flavors to explore. I love the Santa Fe style green chili beef skillet. Mix everything together. Also, honestly, probably the favorite thing that I've tried so far, and my wife loved this one too, the creamy pesto pork chop. Already craving it the next go around. So head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active with Factor Meals. We're also brought to you today by FanDuel Sportsbook. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and you can bet on the KU-UNLV game. Would you believe that KU is a touchdown favorite against UNLV? I thought it was going to be closer to maybe 3 or 4 points coming in to this matchup, but that was kind of off the doldrums of the low points of the Illinois game. But still, I actually was looking at CFB Graphs, which does a lot of good analytic work. It actually has this closer to KU being like 12-point favorites. So I don't know. Maybe they're just underrating what UNLV has been so far. You can do that what you will, but guess what? We have something a little different for you too with FanDuel, because now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form payment. You can cancel anytime. And if that's not enough, FanDuel also has something special for our listeners this weekend. Be sure to check out many of the FanDuel profit boosts in the app, because it's going to make betting a little bit more profitable for you with FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Don't forget to make Locked On College Football your second listen every day. It was on Locked On Big 12, and we did our weekly roundtable, so you can check that episode out as well. Other players of note for UNLV that I wanted to discuss. Obviously, KU center becomes important with the structure of their defense and everything. They have really good skill players. Ricky White is an All-American level receiver. He had 1,483 receiving yards last year, 7 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown in the bowl against Kansas. So far earlier this year, 7 catches. He had 5 last week. He'll be a focal part of the game plan. Jacob DeJesus, he's a slot receiver running back hybrid. He went off against KU in the bowl game. Super shifty, agile, does it all. KU's done a pretty good job tackling early in the season, but I don't know that they've been tested like they will with UNLV. Like Illinois tested you from a power football sense. UNLV is going to test you from a speed sense and being able to wrap up and tackle guys in the open field who are very good at making you miss. The quarterback is Matthew Sluka, not nearly as good of a passer as Jaden Maeva, so that's the positive. But the negative is that he is, I don't know, maybe even better at like protecting the football, like not throwing interceptions, but more so he is just an unbelievable runner of the football. He actually had a 92 Pro Football Focus grade in 2023. That was at Holy Cross at the FCS level, but his final 2 seasons at Holy Cross, because he played like 4 years, he had 66 total touchdowns to 9 interceptions. And he had 2,500 rushing yards. This dude is big. He's kind of a Colin Klein type runner. He's been inaccurate early on, but experienced player, dual threat. It'll be a much different challenge for KU. Left tackle, Jalen St. John, he struggled in run blocking, but he has a 90 pass block grade. So that'll be something interesting for the KU pass rushers. That's kind of the case for the left side of the line, whereas the right side of the line features a really good side with Tiger Shanks at right tackle and Matthias Sua, who is both of those are very balanced, good players at right guard and right tackle. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball for what UNLV has out there. We mentioned Whitmore being a really good run stopper with that 85 PFF run stopping grade. Jalen Dixon has also been solid against the run on the same side. Side is kind of that edge outside linebacker, so maybe a little tougher to run to that side of the football, run to the opposite side, and you would think you're going to have more success. And then you have the 2 inside linebackers are really stars of the show for the UNLV defense. Marcel McDuffie, he was average last year by PFF grade. He's early on this season got a 77 PFF grade, so he's looked really good. Jackson Woodard is just a production machine, racks up tackles, TFLs. He's a good blitzer from the linebacker position, so those guys are ones to watch. And then at corner, Cameron Oliver is a stud. I don't know that I love their corner depth, but he can help take away, right? Like, I mean, we've seen Jalen Daniels really like to go to Luke Grimm. What if he takes away Luke Grimm? In theory, KU has, I think, good depth of having a second and third receiver with Arnold and Skinner, but we haven't always seen Daniels so far this season want to really spread it out that way. They also have of note Tony Grimes. He's a former 5-star corner who's played at like North Carolina and I think one or two other schools. He's been playing like safety so far this year. And then they have Jalen Catalon, who's a former Arkansas player. I think he played against KU in the bowl game. He has a 90 PFF grade early on in the season at strong safety. So they have a talented back end to the secondary for sure that is going to make things a little bit more difficult on KU. This is a very good UNLV football team. It's one that, could win double-digit games, could contend to be the top team out of the group of 5, and certainly they have a lot of star players to go with it. All right, let's talk 3 areas where KU is excelling, 3 areas where KU is struggling statistically on the other side with Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. When you're hiring for small businesses, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. They help you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to a perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within just 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And you can just post a job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncallege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncallege. Post a job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, welcome back into Locked On Jayhawks. We'll have our KU UNLV full preview for tomorrow's episode, getting ready for the Friday night action between the Jayhawks and the Rebels, running Rebels, I guess I should say. All right, 3 areas where KU is excelling and struggling statistically and with Pro Football Focus. Let's start with the strong areas early this season. Blocking has been a big one. Kansas ranks 28th in pass blocking grade on Pro Football Focus, and they rank 2nd right now in run blocking grade. The only team who's higher than them in run blocking grade is Navy, who, like, that's all they do. They run the football. They run triple option, right? So that's good company to be in. From a raw stats basis, KU's also only allowed 1 sack in 2 games. That's a good number. This one is the one that really blew my mind. They've only given up 3 tackles for loss allowed. They are pushing the pile forward. The only teams who have given up less TFLs than KU, Navy again, and Army, 2 teams who run triple option, which is like very hard. Like, that's the whole point of the triple option, that you're going to consistently be gaining 2 or 3 yards at the very least to keep things moving forward. Doesn't hurt when describing that the blocking's been good either, and saying that they're averaging 6.6 yards per carry. So line's been really good early this season for KU. The tackling has been good for KU. As I mentioned, this is going to be a different beast because UNLV has more speed and like skill talent than the other teams you played against. So different way of going at it. But KU right now is 13th in tackling grade. And I'll be interested to see if it does translate into a game like this, because there are teams in the Big 12 who are going to have that skill talent to make you miss, right? Like, you don't play UCF this year, but that would be the type of team. TCU, that's the type of team that they are. Like, they're going to have still skill talent that can make you miss with speed. So this one will be more, like Colorado, right? This one will be more indicative of how good of a tackling unit they'll be against teams like this, will carry to the Big 12 than it will the Illinois game. But like, you look at the West Virginia game, the Illinois game probably, lines up more with the West Virginia game. So it just kind of depends. But still, it's really been everybody, like, all over the field, even the secondary, the front 7. There's only 1 player on KU who's even missed 2 or more tackles so far this season. Everybody's either missed 0 or 1. The only guy who's missed 2, ironically, is Tommy Dunn. I say ironically because Tommy Dunn's been awesome to start the season, right? And like, that's been the only thing, right? Kansas only missed 10 tackles so far through 2 games. They missed more than that by a handful in just the Missouri State game a season ago. So tackling seems to be improved. I think a big reason why is the linebacker improvement. But again, going to get tested more against UNLV. And then coverage has been good. Kansas is 6th in coverage grade on PFF. And I think it makes sense to me. Like, I even look at some of the big plays that Illinois had in the 4th quarter passing the football. It was pretty good coverage. It was just like a perfectly thrown ball and a good play by the receiver. Like, Franklin makes that catch with one hand. And I argued earlier that, like, okay, maybe if Kobe Bryant is the one guarding him on the outside with a little bit more size, maybe that doesn't happen. But like, still, it wasn't like bad coverage. It's not like he just got burned. You look at the one like 3rd and long they had where he kind of toe drags on the sideline and able to catch that thing coming in. Like, that's a perfect throw and catch. That's really tough to defend. So 6th in coverage grade, which makes sense based on what we thought with players coming in, and specifically the top 2 in terms of like NFL passer rating against for KU. Mello Dotson been targeted 8 times, 33 NFL passer rating against. OJ Burrows targeted 5 times, only a 39.6 NFL passer rating against. Okay, what about the weak areas early on for KU right now statistically? Passing the football. I mean, that just hasn't been a thing for KU so far. They're 106th when you look at Pro Football Focus's passing grade. When you look at ESPN's total QBR, we did the who stat line is it anyway with Nick, that Jalen's total QBR, which has been amazing in 2022 and 2023, is now, like, for this year below that of, guys like Peyton Bender and Jordan Webb and stuff like that. But it's 102nd right now for this year. KU is also 111th in EPA on the passing game. And Jalen is also tied 200, and I don't even know how this is possible, tied 261st in the country in interceptions thrown. I guess it would be possible because maybe this early in the season is everybody's qualified. So it's like if a random 3rd string came into an FCS game for some team, like, and he threw no picks because he threw 2 passes, it counts, but still, that's pretty bananas. KU is also just 15th of 16 Big 12 teams in passing yards per game. They're getting just 6.4 pass yards per attempt. That would be the lowest mark for KU since 2020 when they were at 4.9. Before that, 2018 when they were at 5.9. And the air yards per attempt is 4.5, which, like, the past couple of years they've been closer to 10. So they're not throwing even through the deep balls that they've thrown, they're throwing so many short passes and screens that it is still like counteracting that for that average. So I don't think the receivers maybe have been as good at gaining separation early this season as they were the last 2 years. Although I will say the last couple of years, I don't think they mostly excelled at getting separation. It was making catches when contested catches and making good plays. But I think that's more about Andy Kotelnicki not being here, who is so good at scheming guys more open. Okay, turnover margin. That's been a weak area early. Kansas currently -3 in turnover margin. That ranks 126th in the country. It's a combo of things. They're not forcing them. They had the pick 6 early in the Lindenwood game, but they weren't really forcing a ton that game besides that. I don't think they had any others. Did they have any against Illinois? Man, they got so close to having one on that punt that could have been. But currently -3 there. They're not forcing them, and they're giving them up way too much. That's a bad combo to be in. And then the last one here that's been kind of a weak area early is explosive plays. This was something that Kansas excelled at under Andy Kotelnicki the last couple of seasons. And it feels like KU early this season has replaced the big plays with, like, I don't know. I almost feel like the big plays for Kansas, a lot of them happened organically. It was like, we're going to run this good play, and it's a 15-yard pass, and boom, all of a sudden it was a great scheme, and now our guy busted into a 30-yard gain. And we're going to run this running play that we think is good that can get us, 8 to 10 yards, and boom, it busts open for a 60-yard gain or something like that. Whereas it feels like with this offense, it's like trying to get the big play. Like it's like, no, we are going to throw it 60 yards downfield. We're going to throw it 40 yards downfield and trying to get that. I don't know. Maybe that's just me overthinking it early in the season, but like plays of 10 or more yards. In 2023, Kansas was 29th in the country. Right now this season, they're 67th. Plays of 20 or more yards in 2023. Kansas was 17th. Right now they're 47th. Plays of 30 plus yards in 2023. Kansas was 10th. 2024, they're 103rd. Plays of 40 plus yards. Last season, Kansas was 7th. This year, they're 55th. This is probably more about the passing game, some of the issues that they're happening right now. And if they can figure out the passing game, it probably opens up the run game more, that you can hit more of these ones. But yeah, that's kind of the big thing that they need to figure out. They need to hit those bigger plays. They need to hit the passing game a little bit more consistently. And if they can, then they'll be back to where we thought they were in the preseason. If they don't, then, it's just going to be a different conversation all season long. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll be back tomorrow for our KU UNLV preview. So make sure you subscribe to the show and catching it anywhere you get your podcast. See you then.